Grow Great is a city government leadership podcast with Lisa Norris and me, Randy Cantrell. Each week we share insights, experiences, and wisdom to help you and your leadership grow great. Our website is growgreat.com. Episode 2204, The Power of Painting Yourself into a Corner. Growgreat.com is the website. She is Lisa Norris. You knew that already. I'm Randy Cantrell. We're talking leadership. We're always talking leadership. We're specifically talking leadership in the context of city government. Building on the last show, we talked about leadership versus management. And while it is a focus on others, lest we sound contradictory, let's think about ourselves. Let's get selfish for a moment. And so we want to give you actionable things. And the first actionable thing that we can really give you in today's show is you've got to be willing to accept responsibility for everything. That doesn't mean that you're to blame for everything. There's a difference between blame and responsibility. Number one, I would argue, blame who cares. Responsibility, we all care. Accepting responsibility for it all means that now what? Whatever your situation, whatever your circumstance is right now, I don't care who's at fault, but you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with right now. And everybody's got something that they're dealing with right now.
That's
maybe you contributed to it. Maybe you didn't contribute to it at all. Who cares? But can you find a way to accept responsibility for what's next? For now, what are you going to do with it? I've made the analogy for years. I had to come up with something because when I stepped away from running companies, which is all I had done since I was in my mid-20s until I was over 50, it's all I knew. It's just all I knew. Building businesses and organizations is just all I knew. And I immediately started doing some consulting kind of stuff, hated it. Because consulting was doing it for people. Okay. And then you get in your car, you leave, and you're really not part of the team. And that just didn't feel good to me. Bumped into coaching, which felt terrific and right, because I realized this is really what I've done my whole career.
Yeah. You make an impact.
Yeah. And
right?
this is what I love. So naturally people, well, what do you do? And you tell people you coach and they're, they think sports or whatever. So I had to come up with some explanation. And this is what I crafted, right, wrong, or indifferent. I help people paint themselves into a corner where there's no more excuses in the room and where the only way out of the corner is forward. Back against the wall in the corner is metaphorical for I got nowhere to go except forward. I've got to find a way forward. I got to figure out a way forward. In between is the mirror. I want to help people paint themselves into a corner, hold up a mirror, look at themselves, and figure out, what am I going to do? It doesn't matter what my boss does. It doesn't matter what my boss is. What am I going to do?
Mirror, mirror on the wall.
I got to accept responsibility for this, to which most people, they don't listen closely enough, and they go, oh, so you paint people in a corner. No, I don't paint people in a corner. We paint ourselves into a corner.
That's right.
But I'm using that metaphor because I hope that it helps paint a picture of what Lisa has to do. We all have to do this. If we're going to grow our leadership and have any chance of growing the leadership capacity of other people, it's got to begin with us.
That's
so in
right.
that regard, we do have to be a little bit self-focused.
The we begins with me. I did an episode, in our Walk the Talk on that. The we begins with me.
Yeah.
You have
Tell people
to,
what Walk the Talk is, by the way.
Walk the Talk's a leadership series. We do like quick hit topics, and they're out on YouTube, and we're adding to them monthly.
This is an internal project that you
internal project. We're a big city. Well, I say big, not as big as a Houston or Chicago, but we've got about 1,700 employees and a 200,000 population. And we had to find a way because we don't have an organizational trainer. I'm the one that does the training on my staff. and we can't possibly reach them all because we have fire and police dispatchers that work deep nights. We have crews that work 24/7 around the clock. We have all these different unique shifts in city government, and we couldn't reach them. So basically, Walk the Talk, we did a video series that we record on quick hit topics, trust, leadership, different topics that the leaders can watch with a small group or individually. And then it poses, it's a quick video, quick introduction by myself or somebody else. And then questions are posed, usually two, that you ponder on and talk about with your group of what are you recognizing yourself that needs change based on the topic we just covered? And what are you going to do to change that when you get back? When you leave this session, how are you going to implement change to make a difference and apply it? And that's really what it's all about. What we call
so
it.
These are all, so anybody, we can access these if
that's
we want to go watch
YouTube.
these. All right. Go to our website, growgreat.com. Go to the show notes for this episode, and we will put links to this for those of you that are like, well, I'd like to see what that project is like. Because
and these are simple, not professionally produced. We just did things that we could obviously do quick hits. So just know that going into it.
Well, but don't sell yourself short.
But we have a producer.
Yeah, they're reasonably slick.
Sure.
They're not, it doesn't look like you're doing this in, your mom's basement or
anything. No.
They're, so the production.
It's just not like a TV show produced, right? But they do a really great job of putting it all together. Our production guy does a really amazing job to help us with these.
But it's a tool. It's a tool to help leaders lead and help leaders develop leaders. That's kind of
without me having to do it and try to touch everybody.
Correct. Correct.
It's really intended to have a moderator that can lead it without any preparation.
I didn't mean to sidetrack you, but I wanted to make sure that the audience understood when you said walk the talk. They're like,
sure,
what you're thinking of. Okay, so this self-responsibility, this painting ourselves into a corner where we've got no more excuses and accepting responsibility for all of it, whatever it is. I don't know. What thoughts leap to your mind?
Well, I think it's important that as I've helped leaders evaluate this, it does often, the conversations, and you guys have probably all had them out there. In my world, I'm in HR, so we service a lot of different industries. We've talked about that. We service police, fire, we service crews that are in the streets, we service office staff, and I serve the executive team. And a lot of times they will come to me as an example, and they'll say, we have this employee, they are horrible, we need to fire them, right? And it's a problem, but you can tell genuinely that they have a problem with an employee, and we'll ask questions. And they're like, this person's been a problem for a while. They're doing things for the city that's not good. And we'll investigate, and there's no documentation, or it's minimal. We found one verbal from 15 years ago. And so the challenge becomes, as we question them, tell me more about what you're seeing. And then we'll ask questions. Again, we talk about curiosity. I'll say, okay, have you told them? No, everybody should know. Everybody should know you're supposed to be here at 8 every day. They get here at 8:10. Have you told, is it important to be there before 8? Yes, everybody knows that. When does the whole group know that? When did you tell them?
Right.
And it's often assumed that they should know. But so many people, I found this with our teenagers. Randy, you may have experienced the same thing. When you get into a work environment, you just can't wear earbuds at the front counter and look down and not acknowledge a customer standing there. But sometimes you just have to tell them. They just don't know. They haven't been taught what we think is a common business practice. So when you talk about painting them into the corner, sometimes you have to acknowledge yourself. Have you done your part to make sure they know? Because my position is nobody can fix what they do not know about. At least give an opportunity to fix. And I apply that to us as leaders as well. We need to see ourselves and maybe ask the question of our team. We do a lot of surveys here in Grand Prairie. I did one myself on my team to say, what do you see we need to change? I call it the magic wand question. If you could wave a magic wand, what's the one thing that we need to change that is driving you nuts, that we have the power to? Don't say we need to
Right.
have a new $40 million building tomorrow.
Right.
Oh, we can't do that. But what's something in our control that we can change? And when we ask those questions, I always tell them when they ask me to do a survey, are you ready to hear the answers? And the answer is always what? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're ready. And then when they get them, and I always tell them,
we weren't ready for that answer.
Yeah, we weren't ready for that one. It's leaders don't listen to us.
Right.
They keep asking for our input. Nothing changes. And some of that you get disgruntled employees. I get it. But I always say, I'm not worried about the one-off. If you have somebody that's upset, you can usually tell that in a survey.
That's right.
But if it's an 80% mark or a 60% mark, you got a problem, right? And so then it's addressing, are you listening to your people and not discounting them? So some of those things are, Randy, just examples that come to my head in the role I play in our organization. About, as leaders, I try to help them, not blame them. It's because that doesn't help anybody, but really try to explore, what have you done to try to explore change? What have you seen? And it's often they think they know the right answer genuinely. And I believe that they think they know the right answer, but sometimes the answer is just a little bit different path to get there for people to be heard and valued. Like you said, to know where they fit is critical. I always tell people, people leave managers. They don't leave employers. They leave the managers. And if you're a great manager, occasionally you'll have people that just move or something else. But I'm a 40-mile commute each way. It's a long commute. I love this city. And I'm willing to make that commute day in and day out and come in on the weekends and volunteer because I love the city that I serve. And I think that's where we as leaders need to make sure we are establishing that kind of culture that makes you want to be here every day to help.
Right? But again, the responsibility, if you go back to your example, your real world example of discipline, and somebody who we're done, they need to go, and now you start probing and you start asking that boss, we'll call them, you start asking them pointed questions of what they've done. It speaks directly to the topic today of,
that's right,
forget who's to blame. Are you willing to accept responsibility that you're sitting here with me now wanting to fire this person? And let's talk about what you've done up to this point, or maybe what you have neglected to do up to this point. So what's the real challenge? What's the real, in your experience, what's the real hurdle there? So that this supervisor sitting in front of you, what's their resistance to accept responsibility for that?
I would tell you 80% of the time it's crucial conversations. They just don't want to have them because people, they often, in any of our worlds, I'm sure it was yours, even in private sector as a CEO, communication, when I do an organizational review, typically communication is the number one challenge. Communication to the troops on information about, in our case, the city government, what's happening in our world, how to benefit us, communication down on policy changes, communication between the people.
Is it inability to communicate, or is it willingness to communicate, or both?
I think it's a lack of knowledge how to do that well. I think they communicate some things, but a lot of it is assumed. We assume people should know. And I think what's
the hurdle to just going ahead and expressing it anyway? What are they afraid of?
I always go back to, they just avoidance is easier.
Yeah.
If I just avoid it, it will likely, I'm sure it will fix itself. I'm sure, but unfortunately it gets to a boiling point, and they do it one too many times. They come in like one too many times where the impact was bigger, and now there's an irritation and a rub. It's the number one thing is avoidance. If we can just avoid it and it will get better, and it doesn't.
It never does.
That's right.
And now we end up having to have the worst conversation of all.
That's right.
A really bad conversation, the parting company kind of conversation, which
and it's difficult for both of us. We try to, again, like you said, we don't take a blame game in HR. Our goal is to service the department.
Right.
I always tell them, walk when you come in my office and we close this door, you don't need to fluff it. I don't need a sugarcoating story. Just tell me what you're trying to do and tell me what the problem is. And I'm going to ask you what you've done. And then we assess risk. Okay, if we do this, what is the outcome of that going to be, and what are the risks, and are we willing to take them or not? And then I look at both. Are we doing what's right? That's our number 2 question. Is it right by the employee? If you were in their shoes, would it have been the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
And usually when you start asking those questions rather than telling them, I don't like, unless I have to tell them, I usually do that one-on-one, dude.
Yeah.
Or
right.
Dude is unisex
right.
in my book. Dude,
right.
I'm like, seriously, but I do that I don't do it in public setting. But
right.
When we coach and counsel like that, we try to find the solution, and often it's me coaching them, like we talked about serving them as a peer. It could be serving up. If Cheryl asks my opinion on something, I'm going to give it to her in a manner that here's what I'm thinking and why. I'm not sure that's what we want to do, and here's
Cheryl's
why.
who Lisa reports to.
She's my leader.
Well, but the boss or supervisor who won't accept responsibility, what do you do with that? I'll go ahead and answer on my part. Nothing. You can't do anything with that. If we aren't willing to accept responsibility as a leader, now what?
Yes,
now here's my situation. Could have communicated, should have communicated. This employee is habitually tardy. That corner that I talked about at the beginning represents your present reality.
Right.
It is what it is.
That's right.
I mean, we can sit here and we can argue till the cows come home why you're in this spot, but here you are.
Yeah.
And
here's the 2 things that happen, exactly to your point. There's 2 types of leaders that I've faced in this kind of scenario. The first one does not accept that they are responsible. It is always the employee's fault. That is very hard to change. The second one is, you're right, I didn't. I probably needed to coach better. I probably should have documented better. What are the next steps we need to take? And then the next time they come to me, I see them going, okay, they usually come in and go, Lisa, you're going to be so proud of me.
right.
I actually have 4 letters that we have done,
right.
and we use your templates. Right. Imagine that. We use the HR's templates. So, those are typically the 2 kinds. It's very hard to change somebody that is unwilling to change, to make them and their department better, because people will continue to turn over, and it's frustrating. And you don't want to be a city that is known for just absolute intolerance for anything. In this city, which I love, we allow mistakes, and it's communicated from the very top. We expect mistakes. Our pace is so fast. We expect you're going to make a mistake, but bring the solution and the resolution to us, what you think we should do, and don't repeat them. If you're repeating mistakes, that's on you.
Yeah.
Right. But don't be afraid to take a risk, because sometimes we're going to fall and sometimes we're going to shine. And you're going to rise up. Right. So that's really, we want people, like you said, if you're backed into a corner, I want to see that they are going forward and not just staying there and looking in the mirror and staying frustrated in the corner. That's not helping anybody, not them, not their team, not their leadership, not the people, not the community. Right. I mean, it's this huge, just think what we can accomplish if we become better leaders, all of us, collaboratively and collectively.
Well, a dozen years or more of exclusively doing leadership and executive coaching, preceded by a few decades of leading and building organizations. And it strictly is my experience. It's my insight. It's whatever wisdom I've got to add. I'm not saying that it's empirically truth, but it is my truth, is as long as we've got an excuse, we'll take it. Which is why I think the growth is so important for those of you that are watching and listening to us. If you take your leadership seriously, and otherwise, I don't know why you would click play on a podcast like this, but I appreciate you. But for you to grow and for you to improve, and Lisa and I are continuing that journey ourselves. Mm-hmm. It will continue until we leave the planet. It's just how life is, to embrace to embrace that as fully as you possibly can and to not give yourself any more excuses. You may not have somebody like Lisa or somebody like me. Well, you've got us in your
You've
life
got us
now
now.
through the
Yeah.
podcast. So, let us help you in just take all the excuses away because they've never, ever served you.
And not only that, it's important, Randy. This brings up the valid point you and I have talked so long about safety. This is a safe space. So when you talk to us, you need to be ready to hear what we're going to, if you're going to ask us a question, we are going to give you an answer, but it's going to be in service to you. It's not going to be, oh my God, you idiot. It's not going to be that. We are truly going to be serving you. So it's safe. And you guys as leaders, you've got to have a safe place for your employees to come. If they cannot voice something and you're going to listen to them, and instead you're going to critique or criticize them or get frustrated that they came to you in the first place, you need to be really careful about that.
And let's define safety. We define safety as it's not going to be used against you. So if you're part of Lisa's team in the HR department of the city of Grand Prairie, Texas, her team knows they can come to her, they can close the door, and she's not going to use the information against them. I mean, that's what the unsafe people in our lives do, right? We don't want them knowing anything, because if they know it, they'll beat us over the head with it. That's not safe. So when she refers to safety, that's the meaning. But we've got to find a way to paint ourselves into that corner where there's no more excuses.
That's right.
We can't back up anymore. We've now got to find a way forward. Let me be the voice of encouragement, because we all need it and we all crave it. There is a way forward.
There is.
You've just got
to see it.
You've got to devote yourself to the quest to figure it out. You can figure it out. As long as there's an excuse to be had, you won't. As long as there's someone to blame, as long as you can be the victim of the idiocy of your employees or anybody else, the idiocy of your boss, as long as you lean on that, you won't figure it out.
That's right.
And that's the problem. And that's why the power in the mirror, of looking in the mirror, is so important, to know that you are in command of your own life. I don't believe in fate in the sense that a lot of people use that. Our fate is in our own hands. It's in the choices and the decisions that we make. And we can see things. We can see things wrong. We can sometimes see things cloudy. And we need clarity. We all need clarity. You're going to hear us talk about understanding at some point. One of the leadership recipe ingredients and understanding is, can I see it right in real time, which is how I define wisdom. We can all look back in 2020 hindsight and go, well, man, I should have done this, should have done that. Well, everybody can do that.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, but in the moment, here's where this is where you're at. My back's against the wall. This is my present circumstance. Who cares how I got here? Now what am I going to do? What am I going to do to get out of this situation and move forward? I need to see as clearly as I possibly can, so I can make the very best decision. We just felt it was necessary to kind of bring some of this language so that we're all kind of on the same page, because some of the stuff that you and I talk about, Lisa, you and I both know it's just not so common. And I don't care, all the leadership books and things that we read, there are a lot of big shot, smarty pants people that have written about stuff. Lisa and I are just real world practitioners.
That's right.
And we want to give you real world stuff that you can do something with. But this may be the one time that we tell you, you've got to get focused on yourself, because it does start with you. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, Randy, as you're thinking about this, as you're listening to this particular podcast, I would encourage you, think of that issue. Think of the problem that's in front of you today, and think about how you're looking to solve it. And if you're in your head right now, you're saying, well, I've got to go do this. I need so-and-so to do this. I need The word being used is I. And I think the approach is pretty narrow. And you want to change that approach in my book to we. What do we need? Have you solicited input? Is it what you want? Therefore, you're serving whom? Yourself. And that focus is not on others, which is all what leadership is about. So really look at yourself as you think about that issue you're facing. It could be a culture issue. It could be a person issue. But if it's, I want them to do this, I want them to do that, how are you serving them? Right?
Well, take that issue of tardiness. So we got an employee and they're just never here on time. And now I've had it to here, and now I'm coming to you, the director of HR, and I'm telling you, I need to get rid of this person. Okay, well, if I'm that leader, my back's against the wall, here's my circumstance. Now what am I going to do? Well, there's any number of things that you could do.
And I'll give you an example. So let's take it one step further. I ask him, have you talked to the employee? This is a group that has to be there at 6:30 in the morning. Okay, 6:30 in the morning is start time. No, we haven't talked to them. We have to be here at 6:30. The crews go out at 6:40. They're not getting here. They're getting here like at 6:45 every single day. I said, so you want me to talk to them? They're like, no, we'll talk to them. You don't want an HR director coming in. And I said, I mean, I'll if you want me to talk to them, I'll ask what's going on. They're like, no, we'll ask. Single parent, daycare doesn't open. They're getting special privileges to get to daycare that early in their area. I don't know anything about daycare. I didn't have my kids at daycare.
Right.
But there are opening hours. And guess what? If the person who opens the daycare is not there timely, are you going to leave? You're stuck. Right. What can you do? And I said, guys, is there any way for this single parent to maybe change the hours? Nope, everybody has to be here at 6:30. Are they a good worker? They're a good worker when they're here, Right. So I'm like, okay, so how can we solve for this? You've got a great worker. Do you want to go hire somebody and train them? No, we can't get people. Okay. So I keep asking questions and they're like, okay, maybe we can have them, because they do go out and cruise. So I'm trying to understand the issue, and I get it. I mean, 3 people go out on the crew.
Yeah.
If one of them's not there, the whole crew is stuck.
Right.
So then it's, how do we do that? How do we go about that? And so, so that's a real life example. When you get a little bit more of the facts, how do we solve for the issue? We're so focused on the leading versus managing output. They're late every day.
Yeah. Well, and we're assuming
that the human side of that.
Yeah. And we're assuming that the behavior is just negligence or rebelliousness or unwillingness or whatever. And it's just a practical reality of this poor person's circumstance.
That's right. And so that's just part of compassion and leadership and solving for an issue together, the trust issue. If you don't tell them, that person was horrified they were potentially going to get fired because they couldn't solve for it. Could they go to another daycare? Potentially. Is that feasible? Probably not. If anybody, my kids have been in daycare. It's expensive, and trying to find one without a wait list is nearly impossible.
But boy, there's a great illustration of, as a leader, being able to do for them what they can't do for themselves. And I'm not saying that I don't know an answer, but there's got to be some way that you could solve a problem like that. So was there an outcome here that you can share?
What they did is they had different crews that could start at different times. They had
that was where my head first went.
A lot of this went back. This is not recent. This went back many moons ago. They also had dispatchers. And so I said, is it possible this crew just goes out leader? Maybe one crew works the work order system and closes out the tickets from the prior day, until that crew member can get there. Honestly, I leave it to solve for the department because it's an operational issue.
Sure. Right.
I try not to tell them how to do their business, but I said, just think about the things, and it ultimately worked itself out. And we also, as you dig in, sometimes you find that other people were allowed to be late without retribution.
Yeah,
so
well,
then
of
it's
course.
so then it's like, is it really because they're late? But those are just things. It's just about not so much the blame, but the circumstance. And it's just the example of, you've got to dig and be curious. You've got to look in the mirror, like you're talking about.
But until that leader accepts responsibility, again, I'm not assessing blame, but until they accept responsibility that, okay, I'm in charge of this department, it's up to me to do something here.
Yeah.
Now, now the question is, what am I going to do? Okay,
Right.
well, that's to be figured out. We're not here telling people, what to do, but that getting yourself into that corner and sucking all the excuses out of the room so that you
Right.
got nobody to blame,
That's exactly right.
but
Yeah.
you are willing to accept responsibility. People often ask me, you just see the reluctance in people to accept responsibility, and you're like, what bad thing do you think is going to happen here because you accept responsibility for it? And I don't get any good answer. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I love it when you would always, I would be in my place where I was at that moment. And I just remember the day when you're like, okay, let's go to worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that could happen? And then I give you an answer, not, okay, that happens. Now what's the worst thing that could, and you just kept leading. And I was like, all right, Randy. And I think I'm going to get, I think I'm gonna get it fired or I'll have to quit. And you're like, that's the worst case. And I'm like, well, no, that if I quit, I could have to lose I'd lose my house. That's the worst case. Well, no, then I have to figure out where my dogs are going to go, or whatever
Right.
it is. But it was like, you just went down the path, and I see ultimately for me, I saw that's not going to happen. That's not going to
No,
happen.
of course
I'm not
not.
going to let it get there.
No.
But you forced my hand to see through that I'm going in this ridiculous, just whirlwind in my head. And I needed to, okay, I'm in control of me. I'm in control of me.
Yeah, but we all do it. We all do it, right? I mean, we can all sabotage ourselves at certain times in our life. Listen, everybody may have the courage to ask the question, what's the worst thing that can happen? The problem is very few of us have the courage to answer it. And as you discovered, and by the way, you're not alone. Everybody discovers the same thing. Everybody very quickly reaches a point where they say, no, that ain't going to happen. Of course not. But in your head, it's already happening, right?
Yeah.
It's that
we're working ourselves up.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, again, Mark Twain or somebody said, most of the bridges that, that I thought I'd have to cross, I never got to.
Right.
You just never get to that bridge that you think I may have to cross it. It never shows up. But to the point of responsibility, 100% of my clients have discovered accepting responsibility is so liberating. Because the minute I got nobody to blame, and the minute I accept responsibility for the outcomes of my own life, and we all have to, well, welcome to adulthood. It's what we're trying to teach our kids to be, right? Let's impact the change here. Let's influence growth. Let's influence our own growth. And if we don't, then that's on us.
That's right.
That's on us.
That's right. And
all right,
I think,
I'm going to give you the last word and wrap.
Yeah,
this
I was going to
up.
say, as you all look at this, if there's any lesson learned from this podcast or any takeaway, I definitely look at what is going on right now that you feel needs to be solved for, or that you've solicited input and your team needs to solve for, and take a good look at yourself as a leader, and what are you contributing towards that, and what can you influence change, instead of placing blame, instead of saying I want this or I want that. What collaboratively and collectively does the team need to get done to make it better, and be in charge of that, right? That's my parting thoughts.
Well, listen, some people, they enter the room and they make the room better. Other people, they make the room better when they leave.
That's
right?
true.
We want to be the person who, when we enter the room, we make the world better.
That's right.
That's the objective here. The website is growgreat.com. We appreciate you listening. Contact page, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of ways to reach us. Subscribe to the podcast. The best thing that you can do, you've already done. And you've given us your time and attention, and we hope that you'll tell a friend. Thanks for watching and listening to Grow Great, a city government leadership podcast. For Lisa Norris, I'm Randy Cantrell. Be well, do good, grow great. The website is growgreat.com.